And we're back with another episode of Diffusion podcast. And today we have Mauricio Magaldi, head of product at Midnight Network and one of the most influential voices in the blockchain industry in Brazil. Mauricio, of course, there is a lot for us to cover, but first, let's give you a small moment for you to introduce yourself and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ricky. It's a pleasure to be on your show. You're doing great, and I love to see the community thrive. So congratulations. So yes, Mauricio Magaldi. I'm Brazilian. I live in London. I am the head of product for Midnight, which is a partner chain on Cardano. So it's not exactly a layer 2, not exactly a layer 1, but it is a new form of blockchain. And the focus of this blockchain is to provide a public infrastructure where you can transact as a regular blockchain, but you can also choose what to disclose and what not to disclose. So it is a data protection blockchain that can allow you to preserve your privacy in the digital world. So we're very proud of the developments. We are about to launch a testnet. So that is something that we're very proud of achieving. And next year, 2025, we're ready to launch a mainnet. So looking forward to that as well. In my off hours, if I have them, I produce a show called the Block Drops Podcast, which I've been doing for about 5 years. And it started as a digest, a weekly digest, where I pick my 3 favorite use cases with blockchain that week. And I explain in layman's terms what they are about, why a blockchain would be interesting to solve that problem, and sometimes why they didn't need a blockchain to solve that problem. And I keep abreast of everything that's happening in the industry, from TradFi adoption to DeFi degens to NFTs and everything in between. And it evolved to also have an interview segment, which is where I had you, Ricky, some time ago. And that is the Block Talks interview. And I've just crossed, I think, 150 something episodes on the interview. So in total, I think we crossed 520 episodes lifetime. So it is a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun and a lot of learning. And that's why we never leave the crypto rabbit hole. So thanks for having me.
And Mauricio, like I mentioned, it's amazing the work you've done so far. When you think about 5 years ago, especially Brazil, where we're from originally, has developed so much, and then your show did, like to say, a work of a catalyst of bringing people from not only Brazil but internationally as well. Now I would say more than a show, it was a sort of certain way a think tank as well, because you're able to bridge knowledge, and we know a lot of times Latin America as a whole drags a little bit back regards to Europe and even US. So building this think tank where more advanced region in terms of like not only talks or even sometimes in regards to policies are able to meet regions that are willing to improve their policies, it's great. And I can foresee we will jump into the future with more initiatives as yours. So thinking about, I think 2 months ago, we have Blockchain Rio and Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and you were part of this event. It was a blockchain industry event, but we had so many things going on there. Would you like to talk about your experience in the event?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So it was my 3rd year at Blockchain Rio. I was part of the original organization team in the first year of the event. I had another podcast, a parallel podcast at the time called Blockchain Insider with 11FS. We had a whole stage there where we did most of the in-depth panel discussions. So it was a 4-day event. Then it was already massive. Then last year, I couldn't travel to Brazil. I was busy here in the UK, so they had me over a Zoom call. So I did a panel in one of the days there with Rodrigo from Fenasbach. It was a good conversation on regulatory state of the nation, I guess. And this year, we were fortunate to be there with a midnight booth. And even luckier, we were in front of the main stage. And that was very beneficial because I was able to watch most of the keynotes and the highlights of the event. I didn't really leave the booth, so most of my experience was with people coming in and asking about Midnight, and we onboarded a couple of developers in our Discord channel right at the event. We did a few demos, and most of all, I think we evangelized people on using zero knowledge proofs in the context of blockchain. So I think that was a very successful trip for us. I think if anything, the event sort of became a kind of event of events, I think, because there were 9 stages, and then there was a startup village of sorts. So definitely grew a lot. The event grew a lot in these 3 years, and I would hope that in future events, in future editions of this event, the organization will look a little bit more in trying to not fragment so much, because there were great keynotes on the main stage that had like 40 people, which I think it's kind of a little bit detrimental to the viewer experience and also to the speaking experience. But by any other accounts, I think the event was a success. I met many people that I hadn't seen in years. People that were outside of our industry that are now just coming to these events and asking questions and getting curious. And but I think the underpinning vibe of the event was that the local companies in Brazil were betting a lot on Drex, the central bank digital currency pilot, and that to me is kind of, it has mixed feelings, because it's great to see that the Central Bank of Brazil continues to drive innovation in the financial services sector, but it also concerning because a central bank is a central bank, and we are trying to implement the decentralized paradigm. So it's a little bit of mixed feelings, given the overall vibe of what I saw there. But by all counts, I think it was a very successful event, and hopefully we'll see more of that next year in the years to come. So yeah, congratulations to Nathan and to Francisco from the organization, and Thales. They were the 3 people I interacted with over those days. So congrats to the team there. It's absolutely a measurement of how far blockchain and crypto and Web3 have come in Brazil, and I think it's very promising for the future.
It's actually funny because the last conversation I had on the Diffusion podcast was with Castaneda, one of the most seasoned voices in Brazil when it comes to blockchain. And yeah, the talk was around the Brazilian digital currency. It's funny because we are in a situation back in our country that I feel like we are moving towards the digital world, but at the same time we see the increasing necessity of having decentralized technologies and protocols. In that sense, how do you see? Of course, you have mixed feelings. I guess pretty much everyone in the crypto space would have mixed feelings about CBDCs. But if we look at it as a measure that allows people to come into the digital economy and be able to get into DeFi, CBDCs, let's say they want to be able for their retail, of course, will be a door for a decentralized finance. But then it would be up to the people to be educated enough to explore the options with that outside the TradFi. So what do you think about that in regards to DeFi, especially in developing countries?
Well, that's a loaded question. So let me try and kind of unpack a few things there. So the first thing, I think you touched on a subject that is very dear to me, and I know that's also dear to Costa. Shout out to Costa, which is education, right? When you say, well, it's up to the people to go and learn about it and make their choices, it's really hard to do your own research, right? So I think it's incumbent upon the industry to find the right way to convey education to more and more people. And that's probably the whole reason why I keep doing what I do, is because, if I get a little bit more knowledge than the next guy or the next girl, and then I can condense that into a 5 minute drop that they can consume, while they warm up for the gym, then I think we all gain. I gain because I get to validate that my knowledge is useful. They gain because they're getting fresh new knowledge from a source that they can trust. So I think that's also, our responsibility as an industry to continuously educate those that are at the margins. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is CBDCs as a pathway to DeFi. That is a yes and no answer, because yes, there are implementations of CBDCs, especially the ones that are what we call the double layer, where the wholesale CBDC is more centralized, but it gives the peg to a tokenized deposit or a stable coin that is decentralized. So that architecture is one that I feel has better legs to stand on in the longer term. And that is one architecture of CBDC that would yield a DeFi transition from, a centralized token-based CBDC that is wholesale meaning only banks and the central bank interact with that currency, and then it gives way for commercial banks and other financial institutions to issue corresponding deposits or stable coins on other blockchains that are decentralized. So I think that is a architecture that lends itself well to that transition, but that is not exactly the architecture that we're seeing in most countries. I'll give you one very close example. In the UK, the digital pound, which is the version of CBDC that's being experimented by the Bank of England and the BIS, is very much centralized. Everything is maintained through the access of an API that is provided centrally by the Bank of England. So it's not exactly decentralized or an attempt to decentralize like the Drax is doing in Brazil. It's very much centralized, although it is a digital currency from a central bank. So I think that is a model that would not yield transition into DeFi because of the very nature of that particular architecture. So that's kind of the second aspect of what we were talking about. But then there's a third aspect that is not necessarily related to education and not necessarily related to CBDCs, which is regulation, right? I think regulation plays a very unique role into enabling the decentralized paradigm. And it plays a unique role in two major aspects. The first one is clarity. Because don't get me wrong, I love being a degen. I don't think we're going to get 50%, 60%, 70% of the population of the world to become a degen, to become self-sovereign, right? We are a diverse species. There are a lot of differences culturally across the world, and obviously, again, in terms of education. So hoping for a world where 70% of the people is degen, I think it's a stretch. So where does regulation play a part in that sense? Well, it levels the playing field. It establishes the rules of the game for the people who will provide services and products to other people who are not necessarily self-sufficient or self-sovereign, that require some degree of protection and some degree of oversight. And we're not going to change that, because the decentralized paradigm will have to coexist for a very long time with the centralized paradigm. And that is probably the best way in which we're going to transition over many decades, is through a mechanism that involves the incumbents in partnership with the disruptors. And the incumbents are by and large guided by regulators. So I think that's the first layer of that. The second layer is the role of the regulator must change. And it must change in a very fundamental way, which is writing a set of rules on a piece of paper or on a PDF or on a website somewhere cannot be enforced. But if you write that into a smart contract and you bake it into the protocol or the fabric of the industry you're regulating, well, then you're now not only ensuring that there is compliance, but you're also enabling innovation to be built upon compliance. And that is a very fundamental change on the stance of how regulators usually engage with the industry. They are reactive, right? They are post-mortem. They have a latency between when events happen and when they can act. And blockchains benefit regulators in the exact same way they benefit the innovators. So the regulators instance will have to change so that can unlock this widespread adoption. So at least that's my thesis. So I think in that sense is what I see Drax as a gateway or a pathway to that scenario, because if the central banks really understand the technology stack, really experiment, and really benefit from whatever that technology can offer, well, then we're all playing in the same ecosystem and we can all benefit the same way from that particular new paradigm.
You know what? Like, I agree with every single thing that you mentioned, and it's actually funny to think. It's just like 4 years ago, I was a completely different person. I had that, let's say you could even call it like anarcho-capitalist vision. And today I'm becoming more like the sorts of World Economic Forum. I believe like at the end of the day, there are some things that we are able to change, and some others we are not able or not even willing to. So what we can do best is to create the tools for those who are interested, and of course provide them with guidance, so they know how to play this game. Because at the end of the game, we have different games, going a bit of like Jordan Peterson right now. But we have a lot of games. You choose which games you want to play, so you have to know how to play it. I'm thinking about tools for the commons. We bring this thesis of decentralization, where there's coexistence with the traditional and meeting with the decentralized. Now in Argentina, we had an event for Solana, special economic zone, and I believe that should be the future. Not trying to enforce policies on a national or like a bigger scale, but in small regions where people together, a smaller society, agrees that they want to go in a certain way. So all they need is the technology, the tools, the protocols, and of course the educations and means to. So now thinking about the global south, the emerging countries in South America, how do you see the technology impacting the lives of the people there?
So I was after Rio, I went with Charles Hoskinson, founder of IOG, co-founder of Ethereum, founder of Cardano, and founder of Midnight, a man who's been around for a very long time in the industry and has himself impacted the industry quite a lot. And we went there for an event that was organized by the Cardano community in Argentina. So I had firsthand encounter with people that have not only dedicated their lives to crypto, but had their lives changed because of crypto. Like real life stories where people were starving and now they are developers, and now they are builders, and now they are educators, and now they are researchers, and now they are teachers, and they are economists because they now can afford to participate in an ecosystem that retrofeeds itself. And it's not a belief that the overall adoption of crypto will come from the global south. I've seen it. I've seen it in Argentina. I have friends in Africa that have been getting paid in Bitcoin since 2015. So it's not a stretch to say that while there's a lot of attention to what's happening in the US with the SEC and the CFTC and elections, etc., that is all important. But when people have no other choice, crypto is a lifesaver. And I say this without any form of overstating it. I think, if anything, I'm understating it. There are people that have escaped poverty because they found out how to work with Bitcoin, found out how to program for smart contracts, and they were educated by a community of people that were there before them, and that created a whole new opportunity for them as individuals, as professionals, and self-sustaining citizens. And most of them do not recognize the reality of their country because that doesn't belong to them anymore. They don't belong to that country anymore. So when I hear you say about the work you're doing with Commons, and I think you and I have spoken a few times about the network state concept that Balaji wrote in his book, and has been preaching, and now he's got a school that is the network school, state school, on an island he bought next to Singapore with Bitcoin. You see that that's a possibility. These people, they are physically in Argentina, for instance, but they live on the Cardano nation. Some people are in Kenya, but they live on the Bitcoin nation. Some people are in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, and they live on the Ethereum nation. And I'm not mentioning the chains itself because they are the chains of choice of those people. That's not the case. Is that they have communities that are being built around the possibilities that the decentralized paradigm give them, which they would otherwise not have, because the local reality they live, they have a predetermined destiny that is given to them by whatever setup they were born in. So I don't know if I just digressed from your question, but I have no doubt about the Global South being the hotbed for adoption of blockchain-based solutions.
No, I think the way you covered it was just perfect, and it's nice to have different perspectives, because I'm trying to I'm just trying to understand everything that is going on. There's a lot of information, and sometimes we need I don't know, like a puzzle. We need different people to come and put different pieces of it, so it becomes a bit clearer. I see this like in the same way as you. That's something actually funny, because the most people that I talk with, when I mention exactly what you just said about the blockchains become some sort of network state or even network societies, they're like, "Oh, what, you're crazy?" Like, to me, it's quite clear. Like, there is an economy there. More than that, they're like especially Ethereum, they're able to be programmed. So like they're programmable societies. And as you mentioned, I know people as well that they're making money. And trust me, like that idea of making money by trading, it's just so 2018. We're talking now about developing. Like, and I know a lot of people that are working as developers and they're making money of it. More than that, they're contributing to the build of that network. So that's something that has to be clear. I'm pretty sure that like internationally, people would understand that better. I know, like in Brazil, the conversations are still developing. That's normal, but it's important for us to come and explain what is going on, so they know exactly like where we're heading to. So you were perfect on that point. Now thinking about what is going on recently in Brazil, we know there is a lot of geopolitical, let's say, uh, clashes internationally, and there's also not only because we are on we're living the Web 3 already, but there is still some conflicts between the Web 2, like the social media, the big techs, and the Web 0, I would say. So I see like major platforms like Meta, Google, sorry, Alphabet, X, they are also playing a role. They are paving the way for the Web 2.5 until we reach the Web 3.0. There's still a journey. Like, it's not like we're jumping from the Web 0 to Web 3. We need something in between. So how do you see the digital native platforms like Amazon as well contributing for the Web 3?
It's funny because I think your question, it maybe I didn't understand your question, but let me elaborate on that. When you talk about these massive technology companies, I can't help but think in economies of scale, right? The reason why they are huge like they are today is because they are centralized platforms that can concentrate a lot of data, a lot of revenue, a lot of power. They have business models that were never questioned by the status quo. There is no laws of big tech anywhere in the world. You might have a little bit of data protection, a little bit of anti-cartel, but there's no regulation that says, what social media has to look like, what cloud companies have to look like, right? This is why they went on a rampage in the last 20 years, and they became these behemoths, global behemoths everywhere, right? So that paradigm allows for those monsters to form and succeed because this is economies of scale, right? It's centralized, it concentrates, the value accrues at the center. When we look into the world of blockchain and the world of the decentralized paradigm, that will never happen. And it cannot happen because in a decentralized paradigm, value is accrued at the edges. And that's why I think it's so hard for people to grasp, because if you're an investor, and here is quotes on Bitcoin, and you're buying Bitcoin, you're DCAing Bitcoin, whatever you're doing in terms of your investment strategy, you're trying to accumulate wealth. And you replicate a behavior that exists on the centralized paradigm. Now, if you're investing in Bitcoin by adding programmability on the Bitcoin layer that can allow you cheaper payments and programmable money and different forms of applications that people can use to solve their own problems in a self-sovereign manner, then you're not going to get rich like Jeff Bezos. You may be wealthy because you're offering a service on top of the protocol, but the people using your services have a better chance of level setting their own wealth because they're using the decentralized paradigm in their very core. So comparing these things and even thinking, there's a lot of people, oh, this is Web 2.5. We're kind of bridging the gap. I hear you. I appreciate you. But I don't think that there is a bridge between paradigms. When we say Web 2.5, we might be conceding in a few spaces, compromising in others to make use of the blockchain on particular use cases, which is fine because it's transitional and it's going to take a long time for the new paradigm to settle. But I have a hard time thinking of the transformation that is possible with blockchain in a world where it coexists with economies of scale, because I feel that the power of network effect of distributing value, I'm not talking about wealth, I'm talking about value, is so much more powerful, and I think it's so much more equitable that I feel we'll reach that point. At some point we're going to reach that status. So it's transitional, and I think if we are an industry that wants to move forward into that paradigm, I think we have to do like Buckminster Fuller used to say, you don't change the existing reality, you create a new reality that makes the other reality obsolete.
Yeah, the way I see it, the current infra does not allow people to be real contributors. It kind of replicates what we had before in the state level, but digitally. So in that sense, we got a very centralized, economy, and people are not rewarded by their participation accordingly. So I think recently we had X, and it was paying revenue for people that are generating content. That was some progress in regards to the past, but still very far from what we have in Web3. The conversation was super fast, and like I told you, like when you have quality talks is difficult for us to keep this small. We probably will have more episodes to go over. There's a lot of things to cover, but one thing is for certain, we are going full digital. And in that sense, I think for me there is no like question that people will have to have skills to thrive in the digital world, and more than that, to be able to transition into decentralized. Because now the problem is kind of evident for everyone. We have a problem with big techs, with monopoly, with cartels. They're becoming behemoths, like I mentioned. They're becoming monsters, real monsters. When you see the size of them, and you don't want to give them that amount of power to control over our lives. They can become, think about Meta. Meta itself, like, is bigger than some countries. Can you imagine a private company that has no scrutiny, and like in one day they can wake up and say, oh, let's ban this account? How can you, like, you're basically excluded from your internet life. So that's when decentralized protocols come in, and that's how, I don't want to like use the marketing term Web3 anymore, but think about an internet where people can be stakeholders. Yeah, more than that, they can be citizens, and they can have their uh, private property respected, and more than that, their human rights respected as well. Maurício, it was amazing to have you here. Well, I leave you the invite for you to come again in the future. But yeah, feel free also to leave your social media. You're quite big on LinkedIn, one of the biggest voices we have in not only Brazil but Latin America, and you also now in Europe. So feel free to talk about personal projects as well. And that's it.
Awesome. Thanks again for having me, Ricky. It was a pleasure, and yeah, happy to come again and talk more, talk shop more about the things we're seeing in the world. You can find me on LinkedIn for sure, Mauricio Magaldi. Block Drops podcast is also on LinkedIn. We're in most of the major streaming services. So feel free to follow us, leave us a review. That helps the show. I'm also on Twitter or X. It's 0x Mauricio for my personal profile, and Block Drops Pod for the show. And we're happy to engage and exchange ideas. And if you're interested in data protection, blockchains, and protecting your digital self and your digital privacy, I would recommend you take a look at our docs website, which is docs.midnight.network, where you can learn how to use Midnight, and how to interact with the developer relations team, and how to build and how to make yourself self-sovereign. So happy to engage, happy to talk, and happy to continue to push the industry forward. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I would also like to emphasize the importance of data privacy, data protection, and this scenario we are at now. So great to have an option like Mauricio brought. And well, guys, this is it for today. Thank you for your audience, and until next week.